The dust motes danced in the single shaft of afternoon light that cut through the gloom of the closet. It had been 2 years. 2 years since the house had grown too quiet, since the scent of her lemon verbena lotion had finally faded from the pillows. Elias moved with the slow, deliberate care of a man navigating a landscape of invisible minds. Every photograph, every forgotten sweater, every paperback with a dog-eared page was a potential detonation of memory. He was supposed to be cleaning, making space. His sister had said it was time, but really he was just touching the edges of his grief, testing its weight, seeing if it had lessened in the long months since Lena was gone. His hands, dark and calloused from his work at the logistics warehouse, paused over a small, shoebox-sized container tucked away on the top shelf. It wasn't a memory box. He knew where all of those were. This was different. It was a sterile plastic tub, the kind you buy for office supplies. Inside, nestled between old tax documents and expired warranties, was a small, silver digital voice recorder. He didn't recognize it. It wasn't his, and it wasn't the type Lena would have used for her work as a community garden organizer. It was cheap, generic, impersonal. He picked it up. It felt impossibly light, almost hollow. His thumb hovered over the small triangular play button. A knot of cold dread and unbearable curiosity tightened in his chest. For 2 years, he had lived in a world of silence she had left behind. Her voice, once the constant grounding music of his life, now existed only in the fading echoes of his memory and the handful of voicemails he couldn't bring himself to delete. The thought of hearing a new recording, a piece of her he never knew existed, was both a prayer and a curse. His 6-year-old daughter, Amara, was at a friend's house for the afternoon. The quiet of the apartment was absolute. There was only the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic, desperate thumping of his own heart. He sank down to the floor of the closet, his back against the wall, the scent of cedar and old cotton surrounding him. He closed his eyes. He pressed play. A faint hiss, the sound of a room's empty air, and then her voice. It was unmistakably Lena, but it was a version of her he had tried to forget. It was weak, threaded with the fatigue of her final weeks, the breathy, fragile whisper of a body surrendering to the cancer that had taken her so quickly, so cruelly. Elias. The sound of his own name in her voice, a voice he thought he would never hear speak a new word again, was a physical blow. The air left his lungs in a ragged gasp. His knuckles went white where he gripped the small device. My love, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. A pause, a shaky intake of breath. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I had to leave you and our sweet girl. But it also means enough time has passed. It means you're ready, even if you don't think you are. You're ready to let someone else in. Tears were streaming down his face now, hot and silent. He wanted to turn it off. He wanted to throw the recorder against the far wall and shatter it into 1,000 pieces. This felt like a betrayal, a violation. How could she know? How could she presume to understand the hollowed-out geography of his life without her? He forced himself to listen. Her name is Naima, Lena's voice whispered, the name a strange, foreign sound in the sacred space of their shared life. Naima Adebayo. I need you to find her, Elias. I need you to let her see you. The real you. The recorder clicked off. The silence that rushed back in was heavier, more profound than before. Elias didn't move. He sat on the floor of the closet, the silver device lying in his open palm, his body racked with silent, heaving sobs. His wife, his Lena, had reached across the chasm of death not just to say goodbye, but to give him an instruction, a map, to a future he didn't want, a future with a name he had never heard. And from that moment, huddled in the darkness with the ghost of his wife's voice, everything he thought he knew about his life, His grief and his future was turned upside down. The days that followed were lived in a fog. Elias went to his job at the sprawling warehouse on the outskirts of Baltimore, his body moving through the familiar rhythms of manifests and shipping schedules. But his mind was miles away, trapped in a closet with a single, impossible name: Naima. He would stand in the cavernous space, the air thick with the smell of cardboard and diesel fumes, and the name would echo in his head. He was a tall, quietly strong black man in his early 30s, his frame solid from years of manual work, but he felt fragile, as if a strong wind could knock him over. His life was a simple, carefully constructed routine built around one singular, luminous purpose: Amara. His daughter was the sun he orbited, a bright, effervescent little girl with deep brown skin that glowed and a constellation of beaded braids that clicked and sang with every joyful bounce. Her natural hair was a testament to his nightly efforts, his large, gentle hands fumbling with elastics and shea butter, a ritual of love that was both a comfort and a constant reminder of the one who should have been there to teach him how to do French braids. He would pack her lunch, walk her to the school bus, and listen to her long, breathless, run-on sentences about butterflies and which crayon color was the saddest. It was gray, she insisted, because it was the color of a sky with no sun. His love for her was the only thing that felt real, the only anchor in the disorienting sea of his loss. Their apartment was small, but full of warmth. Amara's vibrant, chaotic drawings were taped to the refrigerator. A small pot of basil, a survivor from Lena's window garden, sat on the sill, its leaves perfuming the kitchen. He kept the space meticulously clean, the floors swept, the worn but comfortable furniture dusted. It was an act of devotion, a way of maintaining the sanctuary Lena had built for them. He carried his grief not as a burden to be displayed, but as a quiet, internal ache. He never spoke of Lena in the past tense to Amara. It was always, "Mama loved how you sing that song," or "Mama used to plant flowers just like that." He was preserving her presence, keeping her alive in the small, sacred spaces of their daily life. He tried to ignore the recording. He put the small silver device back in its plastic box and shoved it to the very back of the closet. But the name had been planted: Naima. It was a splinter in his mind, a question that demanded an answer. Lena had not been a woman of whims. Every action she took was deliberate, rooted in a deep, quiet wisdom. If she had done this, there was a reason, a powerful one. The recording had offered one clue. She runs the city's biggest outreach program for women. I met her at the clinic. After a week of wrestling with himself, Elias found himself sitting at the public library during his lunch break, the name typed into the search bar of a slow, outdated computer. The results filled the screen: Naima Adebayo. The name was attached to a dozen articles, interviews, and press releases. She was the CEO of the Phoenix Initiative, a massive nonprofit that provided housing, job training, and legal aid to women in crisis. And she was, by all accounts, a force of nature. The pictures showed an impossibly elegant black woman in her late 30s. Her deep brown skin was luminous, even in the grainy newsprint photos. Her natural hair was always styled with intention, pulled back in an elegant updo or a neat, regal bun. She wore tailored suits that spoke of quiet power and immense wealth. She was photographed shaking hands with the mayor, accepting awards on brightly lit stages, her expression always controlled, precise, and commanding. She looked like a queen from a distant, glittering kingdom, a kingdom he had no right to enter. What could this woman, this corporate powerhouse, possibly have to do with him? A man who clocked in and out of a warehouse every day. What had Lena seen? The Phoenix Initiative was hosting its annual fundraising gala that weekend. The cheapest tickets were more than his weekly grocery budget, but the need to understand, to honor Lena's last wish, was a physical pull. He bought a single ticket online, the confirmation email feeling like a passport to another world. He told his sister he had a work event and asked if she could watch Amara. He took his one good suit out of the back of the closet, the suit he had worn to his wedding and then to his wife's funeral. It felt heavy with the weight of both memories. As he stood in front of his small bathroom mirror, adjusting the tie, he saw a tired man with haunted eyes. He felt like an imposter, but he had to go. He had to find Naima. The ballroom was another universe. It was a sea of shimmering gowns, tailored tuxedos, and the polite clinking of champagne flutes. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto tables laden with food he couldn't name. The air hummed with the low murmur of powerful people making powerful conversation. Elias stood near the entrance, his work-roughened hands shoved deep into his pockets, feeling profoundly and painfully out of place. He was a sturdy oak tree that had somehow been transplanted into a hothouse of delicate, exotic orchids. He just wanted to be invisible. Then he saw her. She was on the stage at the far end of the room, standing at a podium, bathed in a soft spotlight. In person, she was even more striking. She wore a simple, floor-length black gown, her only jewelry a pair of small diamond earrings that caught the light. Her deep brown skin seemed to radiate a warmth that defied the cool, corporate setting. She spoke about the women her organization served, her voice calm, measured, and filled with a fierce, controlled passion. She spoke of statistics and funding gaps, but beneath the polished language, Elias heard something else, a deep, unyielding belief in the power of a second chance. He waited until after her speech, after the thunderous applause had faded, after she had been swarmed by a circle of donors and board members. He watched as she navigated the crowd, a small, polite smile fixed on her face, her eyes never quite connecting with anyone. There was an invisible shield around her, a barrier of professional poise that seemed impenetrable. He almost lost his nerve. He almost turned and walked out into the cool Baltimore night, back to his life, his grief, his quiet routine. But then he thought of Lena's voice, the fragile whisper that had set him on this impossible path. He had to know. He approached her as she was taking a moment of solitude near a large potted fern, her back to the crowd. He cleared his throat. "Miss Adebayo?" She turned. Up close, her eyes were even more beautiful, but they were tired. They held the same kind of deep, weary exhaustion he saw in his own reflection every morning. The shield was still there, but he could see the cracks. "Yes?" Her voice was polite but clipped, professional. "My name is Elias Thorne." He extended a hand, then immediately felt foolish as he remembered the grease that was permanently ingrained in the creases of his palms. She took it without hesitation, her handshake firm, her skin surprisingly soft. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Thorne. Are you enjoying the evening?" It was a dismissal, a line she had probably used 1,000 times. This is going to sound strange," he began, his voice low, his heart pounding against his ribs. "My wife passed away a little over 2 years ago. Before she died, she left a recording for me." Naima's polite smile faltered. A flicker of genuine curiosity, or perhaps alarm, crossed her features. She was listening now, really listening. "Her name was Lena," Elias continued, the name feeling sacred and fragile on his tongue in this loud, glittering room. "Lena Thorne. She said she met you at the clinic. She told me to find you." He watched her face carefully, searching for any sign of recognition. There was nothing, just a controlled, professional blankness. Her brow furrowed slightly. "Lena Thorne," she repeated, testing the name. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Thorne, but I meet hundreds of people, donors, volunteers, clients. The name doesn't, I'm afraid I don't recall. The words were a gentle letdown, but they felt like a door slamming shut. Of course she didn't remember. Lena was a quiet volunteer, one of many. To this powerful woman, she was just a face in the crowd. The entire journey felt pointless, a fool's errand prompted by the fevered wish of a dying woman. I understand, he said, the words heavy with disappointment. I'm sorry to have bothered you. He turned to leave, the hum of the party suddenly feeling suffocating. Wait. He stopped, turning back. Naima had taken a step closer. The professional mask had slipped just a little more. She was no longer a CEO addressing a stranger. She was a woman looking at a man who was clearly in pain. A recording? She asked, her voice softer now. She left a recording about me? Elias nodded, unable to speak. The intrigue in her eyes was undeniable. It was a loose thread in the perfectly woven tapestry of her life, and her sharp, analytical mind couldn't resist pulling at it. I have a board meeting in 10 minutes, she said, her tone shifting back toward business, but not completely. But this is unusual. Write down your number. I'll call you tomorrow. Perhaps we can have coffee. I'd like to understand this. He fumbled for the pen and cocktail napkin she offered, his hands trembling slightly as he scrawled his name and number. He handed it to her, their fingers brushing for a brief second. Her skin was warm. Thank you, he managed to say. Tomorrow, Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice once again cool and distant as she turned to greet an approaching city councilman. Elias watched her for a moment, a queen returning to her court. Then he slipped out of the ballroom, leaving the world of crystal and champagne behind, and walked out into the real world, the name Naima no longer a ghost, but a promise of a phone call. The call came the next afternoon as Elias was unloading a truck in the sweltering heat of the warehouse. He saw the unknown number and almost ignored it, but some instinct made him answer. Mr. Thorne, this is Naima Adebayo. Her voice was just as crisp and efficient over the phone. They met at a small, neutral coffee shop halfway between her gleaming downtown office and his modest neighborhood. Naima arrived first, already seated at a small table, a laptop open in front of her. She was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit, looking as out of place among the students and freelancers as he had at her gala. Elias, in his work-worn jeans and a pressed but faded polo shirt, felt a fresh wave of insecurity. Thank you for meeting me, he said, sitting down. Of course, she replied, closing the laptop. I've been thinking about your wife, Lena. I searched our volunteer database. She was with us for 6 months about 3 years ago. Show she was a dedicated volunteer. Quiet, show she was a dedicated volunteer. Quiet, kept to herself. I looked at her photo in the file. I vaguely remember her face, but I don't understand why she would mention me specifically. Elias reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the small silver recorder. He placed it on the table between them. She said I should let you see me, he said quietly. The real me? I don't know what that means. Naima stared at the recorder as if it were a strange artifact from another civilization. Her world was one of memos, contracts, and scheduled calls. This small, intensely personal object felt intimate, and it was a puzzle. Her mind, trained to solve complex logistical problems, couldn't let it go. May I? She asked, gesturing to the device. He nodded. She pressed play, and Lena's weak, whispered voice filled the small space around their table. Naima listened, her face a mask of intense concentration. When it was over, she sat in silence for a long moment. She wanted me to see you, Naima said, more to herself than to him. Why? And so began their strange, unlikely connection. It was a relationship born from a ghost's final wish, a mystery they were compelled to solve together. The recording was the only thing they had in common. Lena had left other clues, breadcrumbs on a trail only the two of them could follow. A line in the recording mentioned the place with the broken angel, which led them to a historic cemetery where Lena loved to walk and where a marble angel on a tombstone had lost a wing. Another mention of the quietest place in the city led them to a small, forgotten Quaker meeting house downtown. With each new location, a piece of the puzzle of Lena's intention clicked into place. She wasn't just introducing them. She was curating their interactions, forcing this powerful, guarded woman and this quiet, grieving man to spend time together in places that were meaningful, peaceful, and far from the worlds they usually inhabited. One Saturday, the clue led them to a community garden in a struggling neighborhood, the very one Lena had helped create. Elias, feeling it was the only honest way to follow Lena's instructions to let her see the real him, had to bring Amara. He had been terrified of this step, of letting this polished, perfect woman into the messy, beautiful reality of his fatherhood. Amara, wearing a bright yellow raincoat and matching boots, was a whirlwind of energy. She held Elias's hand with one of hers and without a moment's hesitation, reached for Naima's with the other. Naima froze, her hand hovering in the air for a second, a look of sheer panic in her eyes. She looked at Elias, who just gave a small, helpless shrug. Slowly, cautiously, Naima let the little girl's small, warm hand close around her fingers. "Your hands are soft," Amara announced, her voice carrying in the quiet afternoon. "Not like Daddy's. His are scratchy." A faint, surprised laugh escaped Naima's lips. It was the first time Elias had heard her make a sound that wasn't perfectly controlled. "Well," Naima said, a genuine smile finally reaching her eyes, "I don't lift heavy boxes all day." As they walked through the garden, Amara chattered endlessly, a stream of consciousness monologue about worms, the color of the sky, and her favorite dinosaur. She peppered Naima with questions. "Why do you wear fancy shoes? Can you run fast in them? Do you like butterflies? Daddy says Mama is a butterfly now. Are you lonely? You look lonely." That last question hung in the air, a child's brutal, innocent honesty, cutting through years of Naima's carefully constructed armor. Elias tensed, ready to apologize, but Naima just stopped walking. She looked down at the small, upturned face of the little black girl whose beaded braids framed her wide, curious eyes. "Yes," Naima said, her voice barely a whisper. "Sometimes I am." It was a crack in the facade, a moment of pure, unvarnished truth. In that moment, Elias saw what Lena must have seen. Not a CEO, not a powerhouse, but a woman who was profoundly and achingly alone. The interactions grew more frequent, always under the guise of solving Lena's puzzle. But the puzzle was becoming secondary. They were simply spending time together. One evening, Naima's sleek, expensive car wouldn't start after a long day of back-to-back meetings. Her assistant had gone home. Her usual driver was unavailable. On a desperate whim, she called the only other number she could think of. She called Elias. He didn't hesitate. He drove his 10-year-old sedan across town, the check engine light glowing stubbornly on the dashboard. He found her standing under a street lamp, looking small and vulnerable, next to her dead machine. He had brought a thermos. "It's just ginger tea," he said, handing her a steaming cup. "Lena, my wife, she always said it solves most problems." She took the cup, her fingers wrapping around its warmth. They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city swirling around them. She was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar organization, a woman who could summon a fleet of cars with a single text message, and she was standing on a street corner, drinking tea from a thermos, brought to her by a warehouse worker in a beat-up car. She started to cry, not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet, trailing tears that slipped down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, mortified. "I don't know why I'm doing this." "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe." He drove her home to her penthouse apartment, a glass box in the sky with breathtaking views of the harbor. The place was stunning, immaculate, and as cold and impersonal as a hotel lobby. There were no photos, no clutter, no life. It was the complete opposite of his own small, warm, chaotic home. As he was leaving, she stopped him. "Elias," she said, "thank you. No one's ever just taken care of me like that, without an invoice." The confession was another crack in the armor. He just nodded. "Get some rest, Naima." The bond between them deepened, not with grand gestures, but with small acts of service. She used her legal knowledge to help him navigate a dispute with his landlord. He came over to her sterile apartment and fixed a leaky faucet in her guest bathroom, his toolbox spread out on the pristine marble floor. He tried to teach her how to cook, a disastrous but hilarious affair that resulted in burnt pancakes and flour dusting her elegant natural hair. Amara had declared it the best breakfast she had ever had. Naima found herself rearranging her schedule, canceling unimportant meetings to make it to Amara's ballet recital. She sat in the audience, a woman in a silk blouse among a crowd of proud parents in casual wear, and watched the little girl in the pink tutu, her beautiful coils bouncing with excitement as she spotted Naima in the crowd. Amara's brown skin was glowing under the stage lights, and Naima felt a profound, unfamiliar ache in her chest. It felt like belonging. The emotional centerpiece, the moment the world shifted on its axis, came in the form of a crayon drawing. Naima had come over for dinner, a weekly ritual that had become the anchor of her week. After they ate, Amara, who had been scribbling furiously at the kitchen table, walked over to Naima and solemnly presented her with a piece of paper. It was a classic child's drawing: a blue sky, a green line for grass, a yellow sun in the corner, and in the middle, 3 stick figures holding hands. "This is our family," Amara announced, her small finger pointing to each figure. "See? This is Daddy. He's a tall black man and he has strong arms." She moved her finger. "And this is me. I'm a little black girl and I have my beads in my hair. You have to draw the lines for the beads so you can hear them." She paused, taking a deep breath before the final reveal. "And this is you." Naima's breath caught. The third figure was taller than Amara's, wearing a lopsided purple dress. The figure had a big smile and a cloud of black crayon hair. "You have brown skin and a pretty dress," Amara explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She looked up at Naima, her dark eyes wide and full of sincerity. "You're part of our family now. So does that mean you're staying forever?" The question, so simple, so pure, so devastatingly direct, broke something open inside Naima. It was everything she had secretly yearned for, everything she had been taught she didn't deserve unless she earned it. A place, a family, unconditional acceptance, offered in the form of a crayon drawing. Tears welled in her eyes, the same quiet tears as that night on the street corner. She knelt down, pulling the little girl into a fierce hug, burying her face in the scent of kid shampoo and playground dust. "Yes," she whispered into Amara's hair. "Yes, I think it does." Over her shoulder, she met Elias's gaze. His eyes were shining, full of an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 2 long years. It wasn't just gratitude. It was hope. Later that evening, after Amara was asleep, they sat on the small balcony of his apartment, the city lights twinkling below. The air was soft and warm. It was here, in the quiet intimacy of the night, that they finally shared their wounds. Elias spoke of Lena, of the terrifying speed with which the cancer had moved, of the gaping hole her absence had left in their world. He spoke of the guilt of being the one left behind, and for the first time, Naima spoke of her own past. Not the polished version from her bio, but the truth. She spoke of her childhood in a large, empty house, of parents who saw her as a project, a reflection of their own ambition. Her report cards were framed and displayed. Her artwork was thrown away. Love was a reward for achievement. Affection was transactional. She had never been held just for being sad. She had never been loved just for being. "I built my entire life to prove I was worthy," she said, her voice raw and stripped of all its corporate polish. "My company, the awards, the money, it was all armor. I thought if I became powerful enough, no one could hurt me. But it just made me lonely." He didn't say anything. He just reached out and took her hand. His calloused palm was warm and steady around hers. They sat in shared silence, two wounded people who had found a strange, unexpected solace in each other. Lena's recording had been the key, but it was Amara who had unlocked the door, and it was their own shared vulnerability that had allowed them to finally, bravely, step through it. The world, however, does not always make space for such quiet, beautiful things. The whispers started in the sterile hallways of the Phoenix Initiative. Naima's frequent absences, her rescheduled meetings, her newfound softness. It hadn't gone unnoticed. Marcus Thorne, a slick, ambitious board member who had long coveted her position, saw an opportunity. He was a petty, insecure man who mistook kindness for weakness. He hired a private investigator. The results were, from his perspective, better than he could have hoped for. The CEO of one of the city's most high-profile nonprofits was spending her evenings and weekends with a working-class single father, a logistics coordinator from a warehouse. There was no scandal, no impropriety. But in the cutthroat world of corporate optics, the class contrast was a weapon. Marcus planned to use it at the upcoming quarterly board meeting, where Naima was set to finalize a massive, game-changing merger. He would frame her connection to Elias as a distraction, a sign of emotional instability, a critical lapse in judgment. He would paint her as a woman who had lost her focus, her edge. Naima knew it was coming. Her loyal assistant, an older black woman who had been her mentor for years, warned her, "He's coming for you, Naima. He's going to try and make you small." The night before the meeting, Naima was a wreck. She sat in Elias's small, warm living room, the threat of losing everything she had built looming over her. "He's going to use you and Amara against me," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "He'll twist this beautiful, simple thing into something ugly." Elias listened, his expression calm and steady. He didn't offer solutions. He didn't tell her to fight. He just sat with her, a quiet, grounding presence. "What he says doesn't change what this is," he said softly, gesturing to the room, to the crayon drawing still proudly displayed on the fridge. "This is real. That boardroom, that's the noise. This is the signal." The next day, Naima walked into the boardroom. The long, polished mahogany table reflected the cold, fluorescent lights. The faces of the board members were grim, expectant. Marcus sat opposite her, a smug, predatory gleam in his eyes. He let her finish her presentation on the merger before he made his move. "Thank you, Naima, for that thorough overview," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "However, some members of this board have expressed concerns, not about the numbers, but about your focus, your judgment." He launched into his attack, laying out the evidence from his investigator. He spoke of her frequent visits to a low-income neighborhood, her association with a man of no significant standing, the inordinate amount of time spent on personal matters. He never raised his voice. He delivered it all with an air of feigned concern, which made it all the more venomous. The room grew colder, the silence more profound. When he was finished, all eyes were on Naima. They expected a defense, a denial, a sharp, corporate counterattack. Instead, Naima took a slow breath. She looked not at Marcus, but at each member of the board, making eye contact. The fear she had felt the night before was gone. In its place was a quiet, unshakable certainty. Elias's words echoed in her mind. "This is the noise. This is the signal." "You're right, Marcus," she said, her voice clear and calm. The admission stunned the room into silence. "My focus has shifted. For years, I have measured my life by the metrics on these spreadsheets: quarterly growth, donor retention, profit margins. I built this organization into a powerhouse, and I am proud of that work. But I was building a monument, not a life." She stood up, her posture regal, her presence filling the room not with aggression, but with a powerful, authentic dignity. "Recently," she continued, "I have been introduced to a different set of metrics: the value of a perfectly imperfect, slightly burnt pancake, the return on investment of a thermos of ginger tea delivered on a cold night, the immeasurable wealth contained in a child's crayon drawing." She looked directly at Marcus, her gaze unwavering. "You speak of my association with a man of no significant standing. You are mistaken. His name is Elias Thorne, and he is the kindest, most decent man I have ever known. He is a father who has built a world of love and warmth for his daughter out of the ashes of a devastating loss. His standing is not measured in stock options, but in integrity. And by that measure, he is a giant. And this room is full of very, very small men." A gasp went around the table. "You are worried about my judgment," she said, her voice ringing with finality. "Let me put your minds at ease. I have never seen things more clearly. This merger will secure the future of the Phoenix Initiative, and I trust you all to see it through. But my future is no longer in this room." She looked around the table one last time. "I am resigning as CEO, effective immediately. I choose the pancakes. I choose the crayon drawings. I choose the signal over the noise." She turned, and without another word, walked out of the boardroom, leaving a stunned, silent group of the city's most powerful people in her wake. She walked out of the glass tower, out into the bright afternoon sun, and for the first time in her entire adult life, she felt completely and utterly free. She went straight to his apartment. He opened the door before she could even knock, as if he had been waiting. His face was full of concern. "I heard," he said simply. She didn't say anything. She just walked into his arms, burying her face in his chest, and let the tension of a lifetime drain out of her. He held her, his strong arms a safe harbor. Amara, sensing the shift in the emotional atmosphere, came out of her room and wrapped her small arms around Naima's legs, patting her back gently. "It's okay," the little girl murmured. "Daddy gives the best hugs." That evening, they sat on the small porch swing as the sun bled orange and purple across the Baltimore sky. Naima told him about her plan. She was going to use her own money, the fortune she had amassed but never enjoyed, to start a new foundation, a smaller one with its hands in the dirt, literally. A foundation that would build community gardens and offer childcare grants and mentorship programs, run by women like the aunties who had always looked out for her. A foundation named for Lena. Elias listened, a slow, beautiful smile spreading across his face. "She would have loved that," he whispered. "Lena knew. She saw you. All of it." Months melted into a season of quiet joy. Naima's new foundation flourished. She traded her tailored suits for jeans and comfortable sweaters, her elegant updos for soft, beautiful locks that she wore with a newfound ease. She was radiant. She spent her days with her hands in the soil of a new community garden, laughing with the women and children she now served, Amara always close by. One perfect autumn afternoon, Elias was there, kneeling in the dirt beside her, their hands brushing as they planted tulip bulbs that would sleep through the winter and bloom in the spring. The air was crisp, smelling of earth and falling leaves. Amara came running up to them, her cheeks flushed, her beaded braids bouncing. She was holding a small, delicate bracelet she had woven from late-blooming wildflowers and blades of grass. She held it out to Naima, her expression one of great solemnity. "This is for you," she said. "It's a forever bracelet, so you have to wear it forever and ever." Naima's eyes filled with tears as she let Amara fasten the fragile, beautiful thing around her wrist. She looked at Elias, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. He was looking at her, his dark eyes holding all the love in the world. He reached out, his dirt-smudged thumb gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "She's right," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Forever." He leaned in, and his lips met hers in a kiss that was as soft and as real as the earth beneath their knees. It wasn't a kiss of frantic passion, but of quiet, certain, hard-won love. It was a promise. The narrator's voice comes in, warm and gentle. Love is not something you find in a grand, sweeping moment. It is built. It is built in the quiet spaces, with small acts of kindness. It is built with burnt pancakes and thermoses of tea, with fixed faucets and shared silence. Lena's last gift wasn't a person. It was a path back to life, a path toward a family that wasn't born of blood, but chosen through courage. For in the end, the greatest fortune is not to be powerful, or successful, or rich. It is simply to be seen truly and completely for who you are, and to be loved for it.